It's wonderful to be in front of this audience again. I'm actually going to do it in French because I promised John Thurman at MIT that I co-organized the LH Lab with in May that we will be able to have content, video content that we could put on the MIT website. So I'm one of those citizens of the world who carried 3 passports from 3 different continents. I was born in Togo. I was raised mainly in France, and I've been living in the United States for about 15 years. So as an American citizen, who's also a French citizen, who's also a Togolese citizen, I apply a certain point of view on cultural content. And this presentation is going to be about resilience and creativity. It's really about how you reinvent yourself in situations of extreme conflict. And of course, the slide is not working. Okay, there's a little technical, so of course the slides are not working, so I'm going to have to do it without the slides. The situation we're in a lot of developing countries is one of resilience, and resilience leads to creativity. Resilience in the face of social conflict, where you're in a country where you see everything disintegrating and everything falling apart around you. And in this particular instance, I want to talk about 3 specific examples of we're back on. 3 specific examples of social enterprise in zones of conflict and how people are able to adapt and create innovative, interesting enterprises around the situations of conflict that they're in. So the resilience is really about doing something about it. And the social enterprises that I'm going to focus on are based in 3 different cities. They are based in Lomé, and they're based in Johannesburg, and they're based in Rio, 3 cities that I've worked and that I know well. The first example that I'm going to speak about is a Lomé-based entrepreneur called Aimé Abratenou, who started at the age of 15 this NGO called STEJ, which stands for Sainte Thérèse de l'Enfant Jésus, which came out of the very evangelical Christian movement in a lot of West African countries. So at 15, she saw that things were wrong in her neighborhood, things were not going well, and she decided to do something about it. So she started an NGO called STEJ, which has been providing education, free education to children and teenagers in her neighborhood. And that means providing books, that means providing textbooks, that means providing workshops that people can integrate in. But within the NGO that she started, she saw a bigger opportunity around the social issues and the pollution in her neighborhood. The neighborhood is Agoué, which is in the north suburb of Lomé, a city that I was born in and that has about 2 million people living in now. And the pollution came from people just throwing water bottles in the streets everywhere. I don't know if anybody's been to Lomé or any of the West African capitals lately, but there's a big pollution problem which comes from 2 different sources. One of them is trash bags, plastic bags that are all over the streets, and also water bottles that are everywhere. So what she's done with her new extension to her NGO, which is actually a for-profit social enterprise, is she's created Zamke, which in Mina, which is the main language of Togo, means use me again. So she's applied her model to a social enterprise which is about recycling objects that she basically collects along with her team in the street, and she recycles, and from there they build very interesting bags and accessories that are now sold not just in Togo, but also in some European capitals as well. So that specific enterprise is really interesting because it's about, number 1, generating local employment. Number 2, fulfilling very localized needs, which is, in this case, innovative fashion. And of course, solving part of the problem with solution of recycling and so on. So in her case, she is somebody who's devoted her life to basically solving very local problems. And I think her social enterprise is doing well because of the fact that she was able to constantly just innovate and finding solutions that were specific to her neighborhood. Number 2 example that I want to talk about is Johannesburg. There's a very interesting and actually world-famous Danish-Finnish artist called Olafur Eliasson. I don't know if anybody here has heard of him as an artist. He's an artist that became very, very famous for large-scale installations in major cities, including New York City. But what he's done is he came to the realization that something had to be done about the 1.6 billion people around the world who have this problem of not being connected to any real electrical grids. So that's, again, 1.6 billion people around the world who are not connected to electrical grids and who cannot get electricity. So what he's done is, with a business partner, he has created a little lamp called Little Sun, which is a solar-charged lamp that is now being sold in South Africa, starting in Johannesburg, and in 7 other countries in Africa, from Burundi all the way to Senegal. But what I like about that specific social enterprise is not just the fact that it's creating local employment through distribution, because they find ways for local distributors to get a pretty big margin in the distribution of these lamps, but they're using some of the revenue generated by on-grid electricity to be able to fund this non-traditional business model. And it's interesting also because the company doesn't have any investors that it has to answer to. It's a company that was created by an artist to fulfill a very specific need around providing electricity through lamps to people who are off the electrical grid. And I think the model is really working because it was a very specific example of an artist who was using his fame, his connections, and his creativity to find very innovative solutions, in this case, dealing with electricity. Aimé in Togo was dealing with the issue of pollution on a local level, and he's dealing with the issue of electricity on a much larger scale. So I'm a big fan of Little Sun, and I think Little Sun, S-U-N, if you want to check out littlesun.com, I think it could be a very interesting model to study as far as social enterprises are concerned. The third example that I wanted to talk about is a French Parioca. We call them Pariocas, the Parisian expats who are Cariocas living in Rio. A French Parioca called Nadine Gonzalez. And she left Paris, where she was working as a fashion journalist and consultant in the fashion industry. And she moved to Rio, to the favelas of Rio. And she discovered a huge amount of creativity in the neighborhood of Vidigal, which is one of the main favelas housing large-scale projects that some people call slums inside of the city of Rio de Janeiro. And with her skills as a newly reinvented fashion entrepreneur, she was able to create a company called Moda Fusion, which then started giving, again, free classes to some of the talented kids and teenagers that she saw in the slum. And the classes were specifically related to fashion design and fashion production. So she created an army of seamstresses and of young tailors who used their skills to create very fashion-forward clothing that are made in Vidigal. And around that, in the community that, again, has been kind of disaffected and neglected by the local authorities, she was able to train these young designers into then building a workshop, which is also becoming a showroom and an event space where actual fashion shows are taking place. What I find really interesting about that is the way that she was able to integrate a community as an outsider, a white French lady going into Vidigal and deciding that this was going to be her mission in life, and as opposed to going for an aid model, really going for training and for education, very vocational, practical education. So her company is really taking off. She's resorted to non-traditional funding models around crowd-sourced and crowd-funded sources of funding like Indiegogo. She was able to raise money, and she was able to, again, apply those fashion skills to training a new generation of designers in Rio. So what I like about those models is that these are unsung heroes. Nobody really talks about these people. When people talk about Olafur Eliasson, they talk about him with respect to the big exhibitions that he has at MoMA or the big exhibitions that he has at the Tate Modern. But he, again, became a very conscious artist who wanted to solve a very large problem with very, very simple innovation which were then tailored to specific African communities. So between Johannesburg and Bujumbura and Dakar, his impact is still small. Joël Pin earlier talked about macro impact. At this point, we're still talking about micro action, but what I like about it is they're actually doing it on a small scale without relying on any sort of government funding, without relying on any sort of outside source of an investment. It's really just about being creative in the way that you're solving a very specific problem in a very specific locale with your specific skill set. So with that being said, I wanted to thank you for your time. And I think we should look at some of these neighborhood projects that nobody ever talks about, but that are led by really innovative social entrepreneurs. Thank you very much.
Donc vous montez sur scène et vous, qu'est-ce que vous expliquez votre projet?